it going? My name's Luke. Today we're going to be talking about my short film that I worked on called Withered. I'm going to try to break down what that actually looks like, from inspiration to planning everything out, learning new techniques. Part of the reason why I'm showing this is to learn something new. George. Man, I get one kind of try to do this every day when my kid's sleeping. And then my cat is loud, so hopefully we'll just try to get through this. So, starting at the top, I am always trying to learn something, always trying to explore new ways of creating something or making something. And this year, I've been determined to do a bunch of different things, studying human anatomy, studying traditional animation, studying 3D animation and character rigs. A bunch of stuff will probably go into later videos, but for this one in particular, I was really focusing on, one, trying to break outside of the kind of normal color palettes and stuff that I normally use. Normally I tend to be very graphic in nature and reserved when it comes to color and even kind of style, so really trying to branch outside of that. So one of the things that I wanted to also do with this project was not be so insular with it. I wanted to reach out to other artists who have experience and audiences outside of the kind of bubble that I live in. So I had reached out to a sound designer named Arthur, and we kind of worked together to kind of create something. And he has fantastic behind the scenes and sound design stuff that I'll try to link down in the doobly-doo. Originally, when I started this process, I knew that I wanted to do frame by frame. I wasn't quite sure what the video was going to be about or what I really was trying to say. So during this process of me trying to figure out what it is exactly I was trying to say, what it is I was trying to do, I had stumbled across the video on School of Motion's YouTube channel where they brought in artists to do a workshop series. And one of these artists was Sofie Lee. And she had this great kind of exercise on free writing to come up with new ideas and new ways of just kind of brain dumping down on a piece of paper or digitally writing stuff down. So during this process, I wrote a lot of stuff, kind of cringy in the moment, just how I was feeling. What I decided to do was kind of play on the trope of a hero's journey. And at the time I had been reading a lot of stuff on writing and mythology and heroes writing, or the hero's journey. And I like this idea. I like the idea of playing with it and kind of subverting it in different ways. So I thought a fun way of doing that in combination with my free writing was to look at it from the perspective of a flower. So I started doing a bunch of character sketches where, okay, I knew it was going to be a flower. I knew I wanted it to be hero's journey. I had some kind of nebulous, defined story parameters and just started sketching. Came up with a few different character sketches. And on top of that, I also started kind of doing some trash boards, which is basically just writing things down in combination with drawing out thumbnails for how I wanted all these scenes to look. So as I was working on these character sketches, I always go back to this great reference that a friend had recommended to me called The Silver Way by Steven Silver. And he was a character designer and illustrator that's been in the industry for many years. And through his experience, he's kind of really distilled his process down of what it means to make an appealing character. So while reading his book, I was learning about exaggerated proportions, what does it mean to idealize character, all these concepts, that are just bouncing around in my head, and I formulated that down in my sketches. So I played around with increasing the size of the head, making that the focus. Maybe it would change over the video from a seedling to a flower as it's going on this journey to show the passing of time. Maybe it was a more realistic looking flower where you could really tell it was a rose with some leaves and stuff like that. And so now that I had a character down, I could really refine what those trash boards looked like. So once I kind of nailed down those story beats, I knew it was a hero's journey. I know I wanted to see some passage of time, whether that was, throughout the whole thing or just kind of give an abstraction of it. At the time, I was also learning about comics. I would love to play with panels and different ways of telling story in sequence, but also it being animated, so we could play with the passage of time without everything happening all at once. Coming up with those ideas, eventually I got everything laid down. My trash boards were complete to just regular storyboards, and I thought the next best step would be to bring that into an animatic. So an animatic is normally a place where you can set up how your timing's going to feel, how the whole pace of the video will feel, And for me, since I was also working with someone who was going to be doing the music and sound, I edited together the animatic to the beat of a metronome. And I think I picked like 80 or 90 BPM, something that was consistent, but also kind of matched the tone of the video. So when I did that, it kind of ended up being really helpful for moving into animation. So once I got the animatic down, I sent that to Arthur as kind of the overall feel for what this looks like with some major beats, stuff that was kind of keyframed or edited in. And then from there, get in it and start production. One of the things I tried to do to make this easier was to make sure that when I was playing this out in storyboards, setting up the design so that way they were in sections. And that was kind of one of the other benefits of using those panels. So with this, I would just take things one step at a time. I wanted this to be pretty easy to do, something I could do on the couch while watching shows or, at a coffee shop listening to music. As part of the research, looked up different apps to animate with on my iPad. And one of those was my favorite app. I think it's CaliPeg. It has a lot of features that I find helpful, where you can collapse or expand the timeline. There's kind of a flip book feature where you can use 3 fingers to kind of flip back and forth, very like traditional style of animation. It was the most well-rounded one that I'd used so far, and I kind of decided to move forward with it. One of the other ways I kind of broke this down was I would start with the body and kind of do the main motion of how the body would be animating in that scene. From there, I would then start with the legs, and these would just be basic, stick figures with ball joints so that we could keep proportions in check and make sure that things were expanding and stretching when they shouldn't. And then from there, I would do the head. And I animate this to make sure that I was getting my secondary animation, making sure the motion was really fluid, but also really selling the amount of energy that was going into stuff. After I would have like the kind of skeleton of the animation all set in stone, I would then go and fill out the rest of the forms, making sure that things stayed consistent. Sometimes I would drop in the kind of character sheet that I made in Procreate, to making sure that the proportions and heights and everything were correct. And once I filled out that was also kind of my cleanup phase. So that I would do a fill layer under all of those separate so I could color in After Effects. I think the main reason I did it was to make sure that I was using the same colors across all the different programs and stuff. So all of my fills were all done in white, all of my outlines were done in black, and it didn't matter what program I was using, I could just apply a fill effect to those layers later on, making sure I'm using the correct color palette. But it also gave me flexibility to adjust stuff later, which I was really grateful for in the end, because I had to change a bunch of different stuff. So that was one process, and I kind of just did that for all the shots. The hardest shot in this whole thing was probably this camera rotation shot. Not only did I want to try to do frame by frame for the first time, but I also wanted to do a 3D orbiting shot. I apply this process of trying to break things down to the smallest or most basic components. Same thing that I've been learning in anatomy. Well, what I did was I focused purely on the head because I wanted to resolve the head of the flower rotating, kind of flipping around, coming in view of the camera before going back around again. And since I knew the head was going to be in the majority of the shots and the character was kind of floating or flying at the moment, I knew the head would be leading the action. I started with that process in mind, starting with the head, having it wrap around. And then from there, I just kind of kept building on section by section. I started then with the body, using the same kind of line and ball technique that I was using for the limbs, make sure all of that stuff came around. I didn't want to have to animate the staff doing all of this, so I kind of just had it appear while the rotation was happening. But in the end, I think it all really worked out. The last thing that kind of really started to bring this all around was how I wanted this to resolve. I knew that the kind of antagonist was going to be this like nebulous hand that's reaching in and grabbing the friends and yanking them out. Just as like, I'm sure a flower's life is, in chaos when someone reaches down and plucks a flower out of the ground. It was just living its life, and now it's going to live in your kitchen or whatever. So I knew that was going to be like kind of main antagonist, but I also just wanted it to be just kind of like another fact of life, something that wasn't too ominous, if you will. I didn't want to animate the hand by hand, so I came up with a rig. And I built this all out in Illustrator, kind of did a simple little rig in After Effects, and I was kind of struggling getting the hand motion correct, and you can kind of see that in my animatic. So what I did was I looked at reference and I just filmed my own, because it was hard to try to find like stock footage of someone doing the action exactly. So I just grabbed some Lego flowers and I just filmed myself popping it into a vase, kind of use that as some reference. The last kind of step in this whole process was the logo. My background's in graphic design, so I should be able to handle this. I'm not the best at it, but I enjoyed it. And some great reference that I'm lucky to have collected over the years. And it's a kind of anthology of a bunch of different logos and designs based around the idea of flora and fauna. It's a beautiful cover with beautiful images inside. So anytime I'm kind of looking at natural logo designs and stuff, this is always kind of my favorite thing to go in and look at and then check out the meanings and stories behind all these different logos. And so since this was primarily about a flower, I thought it'd be really fun to kind of pay homage to some of these fantastic designers as well as kind of my own aesthetic. So I came up with a bunch of different designs, showed them to a bunch of different friends, and I kind of narrowed them down to 2. And from those 2 designs, I kind of just did a merger. So I kind of used some effects in After Effects to kind of make it feel a little bit more organic while also still holding to that rigidity that I love so much. And then playing with some type for variations to eventually settle on this design. So that's a look at what the process of making Withered looked like. I have a bunch more videos in mind for other products that I've been working on, and I'm going to try to do my best to document those as well, so I don't just have to talk about it. I can actually talk and show as I'm making the thing. It was an exciting thing to finally produce and get out in the world. It was a pretty quick turnaround too. I was able to get pretty much the whole thing done in a month, because one of my ideas for this year was to just make and produce, kind of have that release and not try to focus so much on being a perfectionist. I love the idea that simply walking the journey will progress you in that journey. So as I'm learning and kind of on this journey of traditional animation, hopefully just by doing the thing, I'll progress along it. So it was a wonderful project. I'm so grateful for all the people who helped support me across this, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.